Many are their names and the names of their masters. The cold harbour of Meridia, Periite's quagmire, the 10 moon shadows of Mephala, and Dawn's beauty, the princedom of Lorcan, misnamed Tamriel by deluded mortals. Yes, you understand now. Tamriel is just one more Daedric realm of Oblivion, long since lost to its prince when he was betrayed by those that served him. Lord Dagon cannot invade Tamriel, his birthright. He comes to liberate the occupied lands. Ask yourself, how is it that mighty gods die, yet the Daedra stand incorruptible? How is it that the Daedra forthrightly proclaim themselves to man, while the gods cower behind statues and the faithless words of traitor priests? It is simple. They are not gods at all. The truth has been in front of you since you first were born. The Daedra are the true gods of this universe. Julianos, Dibella, and Stondar are all Lorcan's betrayers, posing as divinities in the principality that has lost its guiding light. What are scholarship, love, and mercy when compared to fate, night, and destruction? The gods you worship are trifling shadows of first causes. They have tricked you for ages. Why do you think your world has always been contested ground, the arena of powers and immortals? It is Tamriel, the realm of change, brother to madness, sister to deceit. Your false gods could not entirely rewrite history. Thus you remember tales of Lorcan vilified, a dead trickster whose heart came to Tamriel. But if a god can die, how does his heart survive? He is Daedroth, Tamriel I Daedroth. This heart is the heart of the world, for one was made to satisfy the other. You all remember this. It is in every legend. Daedra cannot die, so your so-called gods cannot erase him from your minds completely.
That was Mankar Camoran in The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, and that speech was dope. His claim that Tamriel was just another plane of Oblivion has some pretty major implications and can completely change how we perceive the main questline of this game. So I guess there's only really one question. Is it true? Is Tamriel just another plane of Oblivion? And then what evidence is there to support this? And then, contradictory, what evidence is there against it? Was Mankar Camoran really on to some great truth about the world of the Elder Scrolls? Or was he just a complete lunatic who is completely off his rocker? So let's forget everything that we think we know about the Elder Scrolls Oblivion, and let's dive headfirst into this rabbit hole together and see if we can come to the bottom of this mystery. My name is Sane, and together, maybe we can figure this out on my very first episode on video game lore. Before we get started, we need to set what we consider lore. So Todd Howard, who's the guy in charge, has stated that only officially licensed materials and in-game content is canon lore. Unfortunately, that disqualifies a lot of Michael Kirkbrade's forum posts and interviews. As much as I love his acid trip world building, the only lore of his that we will be considering canon is what he actually contributed to the games. But with that said, this is an Elder Scrolls lore video, so a lot of this is open to interpretation and speculation, but any speculation that I make, I will do my best to accompany it by in-lore sources that support my speculation. We also need to talk about the nature of in-game materials. All information offered in-game, with very few exceptions, is just recorded by the mortals that exist inside of the game. Essentially what this means is that the majority of the game lore suffers from a heavy dose of unreliable narrator. So whenever we're talking about events that happened like thousands of years ago in the Elder Scrolls universe, which we will have to do today, it's all been passed down generationally through legends and myths, and therefore it has grown over time to reflect different ideologies and different cultures. The actual truth of these events is lost, and we are just left with legends and interpretations. But with that small disclaimer out of the way, we can go ahead and jump into this topic. So the first thing we need to do to decide whether or not Tamriel is inside another realm of Oblivion is to define what a realm of Oblivion is. To put it rather simply, they are just planes of existence that exist outside of Tamriel. The realms of Oblivion that we are aware of are all created by Daedric princes. Again, the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, we travel to the Deadlands of Mehrunes Dagon via Oblivion Gates, as well as the Shivering Isles of Sheogorath via the door in the Niben Bay. They are full realms of existence, complete with planets and a cosmos, like whole 9 yards. Tamriel, or rather the Mundus, the realm which houses the planet of Nirn, which in turn houses the continent of Tamriel, is a plane of existence created by the Aedra. So if Oblivion is created by the Daedra, and then Tamriel is created by the Aedra, we need to go over what exactly the difference is between them. So Aedra is an Elvish word that translates directly to our ancestors, whereas Daedra is also an Elvish word, but it translates to not our ancestors. This is a rather important distinction, and it all makes sense when we look at how the Mundus was created. So before anything existed, there was nothingness, an empty space, no time, no matter, no anything, just nothingness, and it's called the Void. And in the Void there were two primordial entities that represented both order and chaos, named Anu and Padme respectively. From these original entities came more. These other spirits came into being were called the original spirits, or the Atada as we'll be calling them from now on. Allegedly, the dragon god Akatosh was the first to come into creation, which kind of makes sense, as with his creation came the construct of time. Things did not have duration before Akatosh. Time simply did not exist. But as more and more of these Atada came into existence, so did the desire to create something within the void. At some point during this process, the Aurbis came into being. If you have played the Elder Scrolls for a while, you should be rather familiar with what the Aurbis is. It looks like this, with Tamriel in the middle, surrounded by Oblivion, and then all of it surrounded by Aetherius. The Aurbis made creation possible because it gave a place for creation to happen, and the Atada wanted to create. And this is where Lorkhan enters the picture. You'll probably remember Lorkhan from Mankar Camoran's speech, and he is the basis of why this entire debate is even possible. See, Lorkhan wanted to create a mortal realm, and he wanted it at the center of the Aurbis. He wanted it to act almost as the soul of the Aurbis, and as a basis in which everything else can be created. It was way too much for him to build on his own, so he started enlisting other Atada to help. See, many agreed to help, but there were some that didn't, and those that didn't became the Daedra. Since they did not help in creation, they are not one of our ancestors, therefore Daedra means not our ancestors. It all lines up. So Lorkhan, and all the Atada that did agree to help, went and started creating the Mundus. During the construction of the Mundus, Magnus, who was the architect of the realm, realized that the creation was actually draining him of his divinity, and fearing that he would lose all of his godly power, he decided to flee from the project altogether and escape back to Aetherius. When he did this, he punched a hole clean in the sky in which the light of Aetherius could shine through, and that hole then became the sun. As construction continued, other Atada came to the same realization that Magnus did, and they also fled, but having stayed longer and drained more of their divinity into the creation, they punched smaller holes in the sky, therefore they became the stars. Those that stayed and actually finished the creation of the Mundus eventually became either the Aedra, again Elvish for our ancestors. They actually finished the creation of the mortal realm and became the ancestors of the mortals. And if they did not become the Aedra, they became the Elno-Fae, which is a whole nother topic. That is essentially just the gods that accepted mortality, took a humble place upon the Mundus, and created offspring that became the different races, more specifically the elves. But anyways, after the Mundus was created, all of the Atada that were left realized that Magnus and the Atada that fled, the Magnagi, were correct, and they had drained almost all, if not all, of their divinity into this project, and they were pissed. They thought that Lorkhan had tricked them, and he knew that they were going to be losing their divinity in the process, and he got them to build it anyways, and they were out for blood. So they and Lorkhan actually convened at the Adamantine Tower, which interestingly enough, you can actually see from Elder Scrolls Online. It's just off the shores of Glenumbra. At the tower, they put Lorkhan on trial. Acting as judge, jury, and executioner, they deemed him guilty on all charges, and they sentenced him pretty much to just execution. They tore his heart out of his chest, and they cast it across the land, where it landed in the ocean, and it became the volcano of Red Mountain, and it created the island of Vardenfell. The rest of his body was split into two and cast into the sky, where they allegedly became the two moons, Master and Secunda. This is a very brief explanation of the creation myth, and I did not do it justice. There's a lot that I left out for time's sake, but I covered the basics of what we're going to need for today's video. If you want to learn more, I'll actually link a couple of videos in the description down below if you just want more information on creation in the Elder Scrolls. So let's boil something down here real quick. If the realms of Oblivion are just planes of existence created by an Atata, and the Mundus is a plane of existence created by an Atata, and a realm created by an Atata is equal to a realm created by an Atata, the Mundus would be no different than a plane of Oblivion. Simply put, if 1 equals 1, then 1 must also be equal to 1. So then that's it, isn't it? The Mundus is just Lorkhan's realm of Oblivion, right? Case closed. Go home. See, like, not quite though. See, that distinction, or really lack thereof, is not definitive. Like, don't get me wrong, conceptually they are almost identical, but it's in the almost where we find the meat and bones of this. Okay, so the realms of Oblivion, as we know them in-game, are all created by one Daedric prince each. And that prince is the master of the realm. So if the planes of Oblivion are created by a single god, and that plane reflects that god, the Deadlands of Mehrunes Dagon is a plane filled with death, fire, lava, ruins, and powerful monsters. It certainly matches the god of destruction. Its color scheme is even red, just like the dude's skin. The Shivering Isles, however, is an absolute madhouse full of lunacy and weird creatures and plants that make no sense. Perfect embodiment of the Prince of Madness, Sheogorath. Point being, each one was created by a single Atata. So with that in mind, we can wait until nightfall and look up into the sky of Tamriel and we see a sky full of stars. So if each star was a different god, another Atata that assisted in creation but fled, that is a ton of gods. Like, and that may only be one difference, but it is a literally astronomical one. But I do need to point out that the stars being fleeing Atata may just be a legend and a myth. So to see what I'm talking about, go back into Oblivion, go to the door in the Niben Bay, and enter the Shivering Isles, the Oblivion realm of Sheogorath. Once you're there, wait until nightfall, and look up to the sky, and what do you see? Stars. Lots and lots of stars. And I'm not saying that that is definitive proof that the stars being the fleeing Atata and Mundus is a lie. Like, there are other explanations. Off the top of my head, when the Atata fled the Mundus back to Aetherius, they could have punched holes in the night sky of the Mundus and punched holes right through Oblivion all the way to Aetherius, and that would have caused the same holes in the same night sky through all of the realms. That is like a legitimate possibility. Also, with the realms of Oblivion being created by a single god, and that god has full control over the creation of the realm, it is very possible that that god would just place stars in the sky. Like, why not? So I'm not saying that this is proof that the stars in the sky are not holes punched in the sky by fleeing gods during the creation of the Mundus, but I am saying that it's a little peculiar and this is evidence that needs to be considered. So another fact we need to talk about is when the Mundus was created, it drained the divinity of the gods that created it. From what I can tell, creating a realm of Oblivion does not do this. It takes a ton of power to create a plane of existence. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I've tried. Not easy. Didn't work. But even though it does create a ton of power, from what I can tell, it does not drain the power it requires. And that the realms of Oblivion are extensions of the Daedric prince that created them. And I see no evidence to suggest that during the creation of their realms of Oblivion, that they were left weaker by that creation. So what does that mean? That means that when the gods were creating the Mundus and it was draining their divinity, I don't think it's that much of a stretch of the imagination to assume that the Mundus absorbed the divinity that was drained by the gods, which would mean that the Mundus as a realm is actually holier and more divine than any single god individually, because it has absorbed the power of a ton of gods. Like, I mean, like a ton. Like, go outside in Tamriel at the nighttime and look up at the sky and see how many gods were working on creating the Mundus. Like, it is an insane amount, like millions. So this means that the divinity of millions of gods were poured into and absorbed by the Mundus. Then to make another assumption that all Atata, when created, were equal in power, then that is a lot of divinity that was poured into the Mundus, which would mean that the realm itself has more power than any Daedric realm or a Daedric prince, and probably the realm itself has more power than all of them combined. So that to me seems like a rather large piece of evidence that the Mundus is not a realm of Oblivion. So far, if we had a scoreboard, we'd be 1 for 1. So let's keep going. Let's look at some more points. Let's get deeper into this. But before we do, I feel like I need to rule out a piece of evidence. So again, here is the Aurbis. We've looked at it already today. You have Mundus in the middle, surrounded by Oblivion, all surrounded by Aetherius. And every single time we see the Aurbis, the Mundus is always in the center. And every single material that we have that supports Mundus being the center of the Aurbis is either written down by or drawn by mortals. And doing a real-life comparison and looking at the fact that humanity thought that the Earth was the center of the universe for a very long time, and we were oh so very wrong, I can't just take the mortal's word for this. For that reason alone, I cannot safely assume that the Mundus is truly in the center of the Aurbis. Like, I'm not saying it's not, but I am saying that we cannot state without a shadow of a doubt that it is. Therefore, omitting it from evidence. If I'm wrong about this and you're able to prove me wrong, please let me know. So the next thing we have to look at is the afterlife. And this is honestly going to be the last thing we're going to look at today. But it's a pretty damning one. It's a pretty big topic. So because of how big it is, we're going to start off with the simplest afterlife. We're going to look at the afterlife of the Daedra. Like the Daedric minions. Like the Clanfear and the Dark Seducers and all of the Daedric minions that we see in game. So the way that their afterlife works is actually pretty uniform and fairly simple. So they don't have a soul in the same way that mortals have a soul. They have what's called a vestige. And when a Daedric minion dies, its vestige is sent to the void. And once in the void, it is then called to whichever realm of Oblivion is its home. And then once it is there, it is reincarnated. Without getting into really complicated topics like protonymics and neonymics, the base process is fairly uniform and not overly complicated. Each realm of Oblivion has a substance that is called chaotic creatia. This substance takes many forms: the lava in the Deadlands, the azure plasm of Cold Harbor, the well springs of the Shivering Isles, and no matter the form of the chaotic creatia, they all work the same. Once the vestige has made its way back to the realm, it is enveloped by the chaotic creatia. There, the vestige forms a new physical body and is reborn into its realm, a direct reincarnation. See, the mortal afterlife isn't so straightforward, and I would love to just chalk this up to differences in belief systems, but the Elder Scrolls V complicated it a little bit. So during the main quest line of the Elder Scrolls V, we travel to Sovngarde for our final match against Alduin the World Eater. Sovngarde being the Nordic afterlife. Nords believe that if you die an honorable death in battle, your soul goes to Sovngarde. And I wish I could say this is just a difference in a belief system, but since we actually travel there in Skyrim, we have proof that this afterlife actually exists. The other races have similar beliefs. The Khajiits, for example, believe that if one follows the true path of the moons, they will be granted eternal paradise in the sands behind the stars. The Redguards believe that after their death, their souls are led away from the void by Tall Papa to the far shores where they can live without hunger or thirst. In an attempt to not be an Elder Scrolls racist, if Sovngarde is real, we must also acknowledge that the other heavens are also real. I must also point out that most afterlife beliefs that have a heaven also have a reincarnation alternative, where if one does not achieve entry into their heaven, they are instead reincarnated to try again, although there are exceptions. For example, the Nords believe that if you do not meet the requirements to go to Sovngarde, you instead go to Aetherius to live among the gods, whereas the Khajiit believe that if you do not go to the sands behind the stars, you are instead reincarnated. So if Daedric minions have their souls, their vestige, sent to the void and then just sent back to the realms of Oblivion and then immediately reincarnated, and then mortals actually have an afterlife, then the Mundus can't be a plane of Oblivion. Right? And as much as I would love to stop the topic here and say that the Mundus is definitely not a plane of Oblivion, there are a couple oddities about the mortal afterlife. The Argonians, for example, they are not the result of evolution, nor were they created by the gods. The lizard folk were created by a sentient species of tree called the Hist, and as far as I can tell, this is not science fiction, it is science fact. The Argonians were created by the Hist using their sap, and that sap is what runs through their veins like blood. The Argonians do mate, and when they mate, they lay eggs, as you would expect by reptiles. I'm not going to get into why female Argonians have breasts, that's a whole other thing. But once the egg is laid, the eggs are heavily influenced by the Hist, and it's actually the Hist trees that determines all the genetic traits of the Argonian hatchling. Even more interesting is our Argonians are buried in the marsh. They're actually staked through the chest into the ground of the marsh, but they are done so with the hope of their souls being returned to the Hist for reincarnation. And although it is highly debated in the lore community, with what we know about reincarnation for Daedric beings, it is not at all difficult to make connections between Hist sap and chaotic creatia, which is another great point for the Mundus being another realm of Oblivion. But there's more. We're about to get into some pretty heavy speculation here about a really obscure topic that there is almost no information on, but stick with me. The Dream Sleeve is only directly referenced in 2 games, and its referencing isn't contradictory, but one reference is completely unrelated to the other. In the 1997 game in Elder Scrolls Legend Battlespire, the Dream Sleeve is a major part of the plot, but it is said to be a means of magical communication, almost like an interplanar two-way mage radio, completely irrelevant to what we're talking about today. The second reference is in the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, more specifically in the book Commentaries on the Mysterium Xerxes Volume 1 by Mankar Camoran, the man himself. In the book, he says, and I quote, "Mortals leave the dreaming sleeve of birth the same, dismantled save for the symbiosis with our mothers." It's this line alone that has me talking about the dream sleeve. This line is saying that all mortal souls are the same, a formless life force tied to the realm of the Mundus. When the soul is then tied to an unborn child within its mother, it is in this connection, this symbiosis, that the soul is given a physical form to form into. This line also insinuates that the dreaming sleeve, or the dream sleeve, is like a mortal limbo for soul storage while the soul awaits a new vessel for reincarnation in whatever form is dictated by the mother. If this was all the information we had on this topic, I'd be way more willing to dismiss it. It would just be a single line in a single book in a single game written by a single guy who was completely off his single rocker. But when you couple it with one more fact that it is true within the Elder Scrolls universe, it starts to get pretty interesting. So in the Elder Scrolls, when 2 parents of different races conceive a child, with very few exceptions, their offspring will be the race of the mother. A Nord man who mates with a Redguard woman will have a Redguard child. There are exceptions, but they are few and far between and usually coincide with divine intervention from a god. So let's take this another step further. In the Shivering Isles, there are 2 wellsprings, 2 forms of chaotic creatia. There is the wellspring of the Mazkin, which produces the Dark Seducers, and the wellspring of Auriel, which produces the Golden Saints. This is direct proof that realms of Oblivion are able to have more than one form of chaotic creatia. And if a realm is able to have more than one form, how many can it have? Why not 3, or 5, or 30? Again, this is speculation, but it's lore-supported speculation. So if the Hist sap could possibly be a form of chaotic creatia, why couldn't the blood of mortals itself be? Maybe forming in the womb of a mother is not so dissimilar to forming in the lavas of the Deadlands. So the biggest difference to me between how a Daedric minion reincarnates and how a mortal reincarnates is the fact that the physical form the reincarnation takes is decided by the mother rather than by the realm. But if the Mundus is a realm of Oblivion, it is a realm that has lost its god. Regardless of how many Atata participated in the creation of the universe within the realm, Lorcan created the realm itself. So this difference in the reincarnation cycle could be explained by the lack of guidance by the god who governs the world. There's also a lot of community speculation of one of 2 things. One, that the souls who do not make it into the afterlife and are then sent to either Aetherius or the Void are then put into the Dream Sleeve to be lined up for reincarnation, which seems very possible and just really plausible to me. The next speculation is that the afterlives that these souls have is almost a manifestation that exists within the Dream Sleeve for these souls to have some sort of experience while they wait for reincarnation, and this one I find a little bit harder to get behind. When we travel to Sovngarde, we come across the 3 heroes that trapped Alduin in the first place like a millennia ago during the Dragon Wars. So if those souls were waiting for reincarnation, they would have been reincarnated and they wouldn't still be in that same form. But it is very plausible to me that any soul that does not make it to its afterlife could then be put into the void and then also sent to the dream sleeve for reincarnation within its realm of Oblivion, which is the Mundus. So all that's really left is to ask ourselves, is the Mundus a realm of Oblivion? See, the answer isn't straightforward, and in the Elder Scrolls, when an answer isn't straightforward, all that's left is faith. Not just in the Elder Scrolls, that's true in life as well. So I've spent a hefty amount of time researching this topic, and this is the evidence I have found, and I really do wish it was more conclusive. We've explored the fact that the nature of existence within a realm is not so different between mortal and Oblivion. In my opinion, the difference between the Mundus and a plane of Oblivion isn't great enough to truly differentiate between the two. It is the afterlife and reincarnation cycles that, to me, start to draw the line in the sand. So armed with all of this knowledge, if someone came up to you and asked you whether or not you believe that Tamriel exists in a realm of Oblivion, what would your answer be? See, mine would probably be yes. I think the evidence for it outweighs the evidence against it. As to whether or not a Daedric prince has a birthright claim to it based on the fact that they are a Daedra, well, that'd be another video. And as much as I hate to end a video like this, I hate to leave you guys hanging on with an inconclusive ending that simply just has me asking you, what do you think? That is just the nature of how lore works within the Elder Scrolls. They don't want rigid answers. They want us to be able to debate and have opinions the same way that the mortals in Tamriel do. And really, in the end, isn't that what makes the world of the Elder Scrolls so magical? That even when we dissect all the information that we are given, we are still left with the same amount, if not more, questions than we had before. So with that, I guess all I really have to do is to thank you very much for watching. As I said in the beginning of this video, all the information we have in game is recorded by mortals and is bound to imperfection, and the exact same thing can be said about everything in this video. So if I've gotten something wrong, please let me know. Like, not even for my sake, for the sake of the fellow knowledge seeker who I may have inadvertently led astray with my misinformation. Also, if you have more evidence to sway an opinion one way or the other, please comment it. I'd like to really truly get to the bottom of this mystery. And if you've enjoyed going on this journey with me as much as I have with you, please consider liking the video. And if you're interested in more videos on video game lore in and out of the Elder Scrolls universe, consider subscribing. But like I said, that's all that I have for you guys. So with all that said, I will leave you with this, the funniest blooper I have ever seen in a video game.
I heard that thieves broke into the Arcane University, the Imperial Legion compound, and the temple all on the same night. Wait a minute, let me do that one again. I heard that thieves broke into the Arcane University, the Imperial Legion compound, and the temple all on the same night.